Welcome to the Histories of Northamptonshire podcast series, and this episode number 74. Recorded on location, each episode tells the story of one of the many and varied objects which are the focus of the exhibition A History of Northamptonshire in 100 Objects. The exhibition runs at the Northampton Museum and Art Gallery between the 20th of September 2025 and February 2026. Selected by local individuals, heritage groups and the museum's own curators, each object tells a different story from the county's past. And so, to our guest for this episode.
My name is Elizabeth Taylor and I'm representing the charity Northamptonshire Gardens Trust.
And the object that you've got in the exhibition is what?
It's a tree plaque which would have been fixed to a tree in order to identify it. And in this case, it also identifies when the tree was planted.
Where was this plaque found?
It was found in the grounds of Ecton Hall, just outside Northampton, at the time when the hall was about to be saved from dereliction and literally falling down, to the point where it was then converted into apartments. And they cleared the land all around the building, and this plaque was found on the ground in amongst some trees.
Which answers my next question, because I was about to say, does the tree to which the plaque was fixed still exist?
I don't think it does, no. And I have heard recently that there aren't any more tree plaques, but there are some similar things that were staked into the ground, and even those are not necessarily adjacent to the tree for which they were intended.
What is the tree that the plaque announces?
It was a hemlock spruce. And it was planted in 1902, which is fairly early, and in fact the name on the plaque is not the same as the name it's given now. I think it was Abies candensis on the plaque, and it's candenensis now. It could be a misprint, but it's more than likely just a plant that's been given a more modernised name in recent times.
For people that come to see the exhibition and see the plaque itself, clearly it's not a large item. It's fairly rustic in its construction, which is to say that the letters are a little bit misaligned. Yes. Would this have been something that would have been made by the owner of the tree, by the estate owner?
It would have certainly been made by somebody on his estate, one of his workers there, yes. It wouldn't have been a professionally done. There are far more professionally created plaques that are there that I've seen since, that are actually still on the estate and belong to the estate, which look a lot more professional than the one in the exhibition.
Why then would the plaque have turned out the way it was? Was it perhaps awaiting a more formal plaque?
I suspect that's a distinct possibility, yes. We think this one was created to celebrate, or at least the tree was planted, to celebrate the coronation of Edward VII, because nothing was happening in the village at the time that we can find, no notable event anyway, and it does coincide with his coronation. And I suspect that the tree was bought and a temporary plaque was put on it until a proper one was made. But the proper one, if there was one, has never been found.
How common was it for people to have trees that they would import into a particular estate or their gardens and homes? Lots and lots of people have an attraction to gardening. We can see that each and every year. But planting specific trees is of a rather different scale.
It is, and the owner of Ecton Hall at that time, who was Major General Sotheby, was a very keen arboriculturalist, and he, in fact, was part of a plant hunting syndicate. So he would have paid into a larger group of people that sent plant hunters to foreign lands, some of which had never been explored, and brought back plants that had never been seen in this country. Whether this was one of those is totally unknown.
So in the same way that some people collect crockery, some people collect stamps, some people collect orchids, trees was another. As a hobby?
Yes, you'd have to be pretty wealthy to do it, but you'll find several estates around the county. Some of them just planted trees and they grew in any old fashion, but this particular person would have had an arboretum, which is a scientific collection of trees, which is one of the reasons they would have been labelled.
Major General Sotheby, any connection to Sotheby's that we know from auctions?
The popular opinion is no, but having researched the family history, Yes, there was. And the Sotheby that originally... there was a fantastic library at Ecton Hall, which was created by James Sotheby of Sewardstone in Essex. And the library at Ecton was part of what had been the Sotheby's auctioneers' founding. And some of them went off to do book collecting, others went off to do auctioneering. But the one that actually created the library at Ecton was one of the brothers who decided to not go into the auctioneering side, but to collect books.
What about Ecton Hall? It clearly had a very celebrated time, but then it moulded to nothing. Do we know why that is the case?
Money, basically. The last Sotheby to live in the hall had to pay off a lot of death duties in a roundabout way, because the Sotheby before him, there'd been a little bit of a mix-up on the solicitors had basically taken money from the wrong funds. Not illegally or anything like that, but it just created a debt to the last Sotheby.
This particular hemlock spruce, I hear the word hemlock and think of poison. Is it the same family of plant?
I believe so, and it certainly was used as a medicinal treatment in those days. I don't know whether it still is where they take the bark of the hemlock spruce. I have no idea.
So is it likely that Major General Sotheby planted the tree for its looks or perhaps for its purpose?
I suspect more for its looks and for its possible rareness at the time. It could have been very scarce.
Elizabeth, you are a lover of plant life. What is your reaction to this plaque? What sort of emotions does the plaque itself ignite in you?
Well, it's very scarce on that estate, and to some extent it's scarce in the county. You see the more professionally produced plaques, but this one is really, may I say, a little bit of tin. I mean, it's only, I think it's 12 centimetres by 9 centimetres. It's not made out of any special metal, although it was thought originally to be copper, but I don't think it is. It's just far too light.
So rather than being a plaque, it's just a label, really?
It is a label, yes.
Why should it be in the Histories of Northampton exhibition? What does it say about Northamptonshire?
Well, I believe it says that the county and the certainly the wealthy estate owners within the county were an important part of bringing these rare trees to this country. Sometimes they turn out not to be rare, because over the years they've been bred and they've become very common. But at the time they were planted, they were not common, and I think it shows that Northamptonshire was part of that major planting of trees, which you can associate the Duke of Devonshire with. The Duke of Devonshire from Chatsworth House and other major estates, but not the smaller ones like Ecton. Plant hunters were sent out to these countries from the 17th century onwards, and they were actually sent out by organisations like the National Geographic Society to map the land which hadn't been mapped before. And that's how out in the wilderness these plant hunters were going, and that led to this hemlock spruce in a roundabout way, how it came to be in this country. And it's nice to see a small Northamptonshire estate become involved.
It's a perfect insight into the life and times of the county through a family and through the passions of one man who did the planting as he did, maybe simply for the aesthetic of being able to see the trees, but at the same time bringing life to a garden which presumably others would have seen, albeit from the outside, not necessarily the inside.
Yes, that's right, yes. And on the estate now there are still many of his trees that he planted, which have grown to huge heights and girths. With
the exception of this particular hemlock spruce, which isn't around any longer.
We don't think it is. I've seen a photograph from the 1960s in which I think this spruce is featured, but I don't think it's there now, because during the life of the estate the grounds have been changed drastically and the planting of trees has come much closer to the house than it was before.
In which case this plaque, this label, is an echo of a former time. The echo survives, even if the tree doesn't.
Yes.
Elizabeth, lovely to hear your story. Thank you for talking to me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to this Histories of Northamptonshire podcast. If you would like to find out more about the objects or listen to other episodes in the series, go to www.northamptonmuseums.com. Alternatively, you can visit the Northampton Museum and Art Gallery, where you can see the A History of Northamptonshire in 100 Objects exhibition for yourself. The Histories of Northamptonshire project is funded by Arts Council England as part of the National Portfolio Programme.